I get to be here with Valorie Martin. Back in one of our favorite spaces, years ago, we met up at what is now the Recreation Center. Back then, it was the Senior Center. And Valorie and I, at a organizational gathering just recently, got to reconnect. And Valorie, I want to say how much it was a joy to be able to reconnect with you.
Likewise. I'm so excited to always run into you around Shawnee, Oklahoma, Daniel. Thank you.
Well, she's my favorite dance partner on camera. My wife's my favorite dance partner.
Yeah.
But on camera, we got to dance once long ago. You need to look that up. But when we kicked off, we were over at the Shawnee Bridges reception, and we started talking about just different things in our own life. And I brought up the holidays, and I come from an alcoholic family. Mm-hmm. And so there's some baggage that I grew up with and that I carry with me as an adult. And then you chimed in with part of your story, and it really touched my heart because I thought it might be able to give all of us some insights, because holidays can be very difficult with families when an addict is involved. And it's a very tempting time for people who have overcome those kind of difficulties to fall back into that temptation.
A lot of stress.
So Valorie Martin has agreed to let me be the child of an alcoholic, and she talked to me coming through the same kind of thing, but as the parent. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you in your household when you were an addict, Valorie?
I identify as an alcoholic. I have an addictive personality, first and foremost. Doesn't matter what it is. But it was alcohol that kicked me on my backside. Raising my children, I have 3 grown children now, and they were the product of growing up with an alcoholic mother. I had been in a car accident, I had back issues, started drinking, glass of wine each night. I'm over 21. I don't have to answer to anybody, and it was okay to drink. Mm-hmm. And then the wine went to harder liquor, and then it just got worse and worse. But I kept denying that I was an alcoholic. It took me quite a while to come to that realization that it had a hold of me and I needed help. And my children, at first, it was mom was silly, mom was funny. Now mom's becoming an embarrassment. No, mom, don't come around. Mom, I'm going to such and such to stay the night to meet up with friends. And my oldest son, ended up moving out. We got into it one evening, verbal confrontation. He went to his friends and he never came back home, and that was his senior year of high school. Wow. But I get along with all of them now.
I grew up, my dad was an alcoholic, and so as a son, my senior year, I actually felt probably it was easier for me to step away from the house at that time. What was your mindset in that? Let's say in your son's sophomore, junior, senior year, it was probably escalating from what I know. What was your mindset? Did you have any cognizance that there was a problem? And if so, or if not, what's your thoughts on that now?
Yes, I did know that I had a problem, and I had gone to Alcoholics Anonymous several times. I had already been through numerous treatment centers trying to kick this habit. This disease is the one thing that tells you don't have this disease. It lies to you. So it does everything it can to tell you you're not an alcoholic or you're not an addict. But with my kids, they just kept pushing, to get help. But I knew that I needed help. And then I'd get discouraged because I couldn't sober up, and I'd fall back off the wagon. And I would pull up to the liquor store and just cry and pray that God would take this obsession away and that I could just go home and not buy another bottle. But I would end up sneaking into the liquor store and buying a bottle. And I felt so much shame and guilt and remorse. And I knew that I had a problem, but I couldn't kick it. So, like a lot of us do, we pretend that it's not there and just kind of go on my way and just try to function. And also I wanted to add, I too am an adult child of an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. There's very few women in my family that has alcoholism or even drug addiction. But alcoholism does run in my family predominantly. So I grew up in the same household.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because when I was growing up, I noticed the tendency that alcohol hit me differently than what it seemed like maybe it was hitting my peers. I'm not sure where they were, but I knew that rather than the party getting started, with the second beer,
Right.
it was more like I started to get tired, but I knew I wanted another one.
Right.
And I knew I wanted another one. And because of what I had experienced with my dad, that sent up red flags for me because I knew I didn't want to be there in the sense of I didn't want to repeat that. How did it come about? When, how, and why? What were the reasons when you were able to come into sobriety? Talk to us about that situation, about what actually transpired to help you to come to the point of sobriety.
When I finally sobered up, because there's like almost 13 years of trying to sober up. My big book would have my sober dates, and then a new one, then it crossed out in a new one. I mean, there's a long list. And I kept saying, one day I am gonna get this. One day I am gonna sober up. I just didn't know when. And it took a long time for me.
So let's go back to your child moves out and he's gone. He says, I'm not coming home. I'm sure you're crushed.
Very much.
And so you probably started there trying something to...
Oh, definitely. I went to treatment again, and I stayed sober for a little while. I honestly don't remember how long. I couldn't even get a year. I'd get like 5 months, 8 months, 2 months. I mean, I bit back and forth. When he moved out, that was devastating. And I honestly thought he was going to come back. It's like, we had a tussle. He'll be back. And when he said, no, I'm not coming home, that broke my heart.
Sure.
That was hard. And it was so surreal because it was like, this is a dream, he's going to come back. And it took years off and on for me and him to have the relationship that we have now. When I was 1 year sober, he was like, I can't believe you actually did it. You really did it. Then he goes, you have 2 years. Now I have 8.5 years. And my son loves me, my daughter loves me, and my youngest son loves me. I have a great relationship with all of them that I didn't have when they were first growing up.
What is it in addiction that keeps you there?
Denial. It's, I'm not that bad. I can do this. I don't drink that much. I still have a job. I still have a car. I still have a home. I still have all these material things. And when you start getting wound up, mixed up with the police, treatment centers, DHS worker coming to your house, because that was one of the red flags that showed up in the very beginning. I had a DHS worker come to my house, and I still denied it. It's like, no, I'll just slow up, or and it took a long time. I went through jail a lot, and I went through treatments a lot. I've been strapped down in a gurney. I've been in a turtle suit. You don't know what that is? Look it up. I won't tell you.
Wow.
And people look at me and they say, there's no way. Yeah, I was a horrible drunk. I used to be a fun drunk. Then I became a crying drunk. And then I became a pathetic drunk.
But you remained functional. They call that functional alcoholism, right?
I was functional to a point, and then it would get to me where I couldn't think, I couldn't walk, I couldn't sign my name. My hands would shake so bad. And by 10 a.m. when the liquor store is open, I'm already in the parking lot, maybe even an hour before. and use my debit card, I couldn't even sign my name. I would shake so badly. And it was horrible.
Yeah. And so as a child going through that, I saw that with my dad. What you're describing, he was very functional, but then there came to a point in which he wasn't.
Yeah.
And you know, I still deal with that. You know, at nearly 60 years old, in ways in which I don't know.
We'll always be dealing with it. Well, it's a part of our fabric. I don't have to drink over it, but because we were raised by alcoholics, even though they loved us with everything that they had, it's still dysfunctional. It still was a mark against, our family unit. We will always have that. It'll always be a part of us. Some of it can kind of go away and you don't notice it as much anymore. Other things, it's a conscious decision each time that feeling or whatever the situation is will rear its ugly head, and you have to go, wow, I don't have to act like that. I don't have to respond to that, whatever the situation is. But we see things through different glasses, a different lens.
It's interesting because it took me a long time to realize, I believe what you just said. I think my dad loved me and my siblings with everything that he had, but it was just so confusing that would just keep happening and keep happening and keep happening. So I believe you were just saying that to your own children, and they know this, obviously, 13 years later, or 8.5 years, did you say? Congratulations.
Thank you.
They know that. But it's very hard for you, I bet, at that time. It was so hard. You knew how much you loved them, but yet the addiction had more of a grip on you than what you could handle. So let's go to that moment. Let's go to that time after so many times of failure, which is enlightening, I think, for most. Is that how most come to sobriety? Do they have? I know my dad failed and failed and failed and failed as well. Mm-hmm. Is that pretty common with addicts? As you watch their life, there's going to be failures. They just have to get up and keep trying.
Everybody's bottom's different. Some people can put down the glass or the joint or whatever it is and never pick it up again. Some people will switch from one addiction to another. I'm going to stop drinking, so I'm going to partake in this or pop that or do this. Some people, it takes, they say you're either going to have jail, institutions, or death. One of those three things is going to make you stop drinking or using if you don't stop on your own. And most people don't go, I'm hungover today. I don't like this feeling. I'm not doing it no more. I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to use drugs anymore. I'm just not going to do it. But most people don't do that. I know people that went to treatment for the first time at the age of 17, 18 years old, and it's 30 years, and she's never drank since. Some of us, like me, it took a long time. It took what it took. And literally, by the grace of God, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And it is truly by God's grace that I am alive, because I should have died so many times, either by my own hand or too much alcohol, or I've made several attempts. I was a very sick woman, a very, very sick woman.
So let's go to that time, because what I heard you said is people don't stop, and with what you're saying, I would say they probably can't.
Right.
It's like just not in them to be able to, and we who witness that, we see that over and over and over, and it's hard to stay in that mindset, but that's pretty much a fact that you can't until something so drastic. You called it the bottom, and I've heard that a lot.
And then it's a spiritual awakening.
Okay, so that's where I want to go. What is it when you come to that last point? And you don't have to describe your last point. How did it change? How did it actually stick for Valorie?
In the very, very beginning of that, once again, I called my son. I became homeless. I just got out of the hospital. I had acute bronchitis. I'd been in the hospital for 3 days. I just got evicted. My car didn't go. I had a DUI, aggravated DUI. Those are bad. It's not cheap either. But I had hit that point, and my son was in New Zealand at the time. He goes, Mom, let me make some phone calls. Let me see what I can find. Somebody to stay with or whatever. And he couldn't find anything. I called my daughter. Can I come stay the night? No. Okay. I respect that. I'm not going to make her do anything she doesn't want to. And then before I knew it, she showed up. She pulled up and get in. It's like, who's the adult and who's the child? And I went and I stayed the night with her. I think it was like 4 days. I haven't had a drink, didn't go to the hospital, hadn't been to an AA meeting. I'm doing this cold turkey, which is not a wise thing to do on alcohol. But anyway, her and her family left that day. It was a Sunday. And she called back at the house and she said, Mom, that meeting I told you about, it's going on right now. I said, right now? She goes, yeah, it's down the street at the church. I'm like, what church? Where? What? And it was an Overcomers meeting. And I'd never heard of Overcomers. And it's for anybody that's trying to overcome whatever. I went down there. I walked down there. And I was still so weak because I'd been in the hospital, detoxing too. And I walked down there and I had missed the meeting, and it was a praise and worship service on a Sunday evening. So I praised and I worshiped, and then it was over with, and I started back home, and I got turned around in the neighborhood. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. So this lady pulls up. Do you need a ride home? I said, yeah, my daughter lives on this street, and I don't know where I'm at. And she said, come on, I'll give you a ride. So I said, have you been going to the church very long? And I'm trying to make conversation. She goes, yeah, I'm the pastor's wife. I said, cool. She became one of my best friends. And I started going to church there. They had been wanting to do a sober house. We talked, long story short, they had property next to the church. We opened up Shawnee's first Christian women's sober house called the Magnolia House.
Oh, wow.
And we had a lot of girls come through there. I stayed super busy, just busy. Even if you don't go to church or belong to a group, go volunteer at the hospital, go pick up trash, stay busy, stay connected, stay busy. And the busyness really helped me stay sober. I still wanted to drink. I still couldn't handle emotions, because when you sober up, those emotions come flooding out. You're screaming, you're crying, just a bunch of different feelings all at once. And Glenda was just phenomenal, and she never tried to change me. She loved me for who I was right then at that moment. And I never experienced that I realized that I was getting unconditional love from this person. And I'm sure other people have loved me unconditionally, but that one stuck. It stood out to me. And they were phenomenal, and they kept me busy. And then a year went by, and then 2 years went by, and then 3 years. And I'm like, I'm still sober. And I used to always say, one day I'm gonna get over this hurdle, that sobering up with some time under my belt. And I finally had got it. And it was better than Christmas morning. It really was. It was better than Christmas morning. But when it comes to sobering up and it's sticking, it's kind of like you have that aha moment, that spiritual awakening. You can call it a lot of different things. There's this presence, there's this healing and this fullness that happens. And that's the only way I can really explain it, that something different is happening. And I know for me, it was God in my life and me allowing God to do what he does, and for me to just sit back and let him do what he does.
So you come out of the hospital, your children, who you love greatly, but also they've been damaged through the alcoholism. One tries to help, can't get it done. The other one says, no, I'm not. But then, just like the one that's described in the Bible, he says no, but then he realizes, I need to do this. And she moved towards you. She came and picked you up, brought you into the house again. I know that that's probably the 100th time. I'll just throw that out.
Yes.
And she also then bumped you in the right direction, but she did not adult you.
Right.
You got to do this or whatever. You made the choice. But then somebody, a stranger, began to give you unconditional love.
Yeah. It was really cool how it all played out. I would have never guessed, it just, that's why I like watching God work, because he surpasses anything I would have ever thunk up.
Yes. And then you said busyness, and you had mentioned the woman's sober house. Is that something that you and the church actually started, and you were involved in that? So you were involved in other people's healing while you were being healed?
Yes. And I lived at the house. I lived with them, with the other ladies. And I would go to a meeting almost every night, every day. And for the newbies coming in, you had to do that for the first month, Then you can go down to like 3 or 4 in a week or something like that. And it depends on what the courts also dictated. Also, I was under the court because I had that aggravated DUI. I had lost my driver's license. Now I have a breathalyzer on my car. And I was excited to have that. Wow. And, it was like, oh, well. And instead of hiding that I was an alcoholic to people or don't want to say it to them, I'd shout it through the rooftops. When I was working here at the senior center, Kate, my boss, would just allow me to share my story with people as they asked. So I was constantly telling my story every day. And people were coming to me. I mean, they would come in here, help me get to treatment. Help me get to treatment. Let me make a phone call. I've driven people to Veneta, Oklahoma, I don't know how many times, to treatment, or TRC in Oklahoma City. I mean, I was of service in any way I could, because by helping another alcoholic addict, it kept me sober. It helped me heal. It helped me restore my family. And so by me shouting to the rooftops, there was no secrets anymore, because secrets keep you sick.
Wow. So let's take this full circle as we talk about the family and getting the family back together. What is it like? Because I don't know, I've said to my children before, there is no normal. Let's not play normal. But what is it like for you now, 8.5 years sober, and what is it like for your children now to have mom again?
Well, 2 of my kids, the boys, one's older, one's younger. One lives in Florida, one lives in Alabama. So I don't get to see them very often. I did get to see them though during the pandemic. That was a plus. My daughter lives here, and I have 2 granddaughters too that have never seen me drink or drug or be drunk or anything like that. They don't know me like that. Thank goodness.
Amen.
After I'd been sober 2 years, and my eldest was like, I can't believe it, Mom. I'm so proud of you. And then then everybody came back to Shawnee for the holidays, and I got to have my whole entire family for Christmas. And it was phenomenal. And we were all silly and goofy, and they're hilarious, and we do wild antics, and it's precious, and I get to talk to them whenever I want to. And we've said our I'm sorry's and our you're forgivens and all that good stuff. And the only way I can keep our fences mended, so to speak, is each day I take that day and I stay sober.
Amen.
And as long as I do that, I get to stay alive, and I get to have my family.
Wonderful.
And my kids are the most important thing out of wealth, marriage, all that. My kids are my contribution. And, for what I put them through, they're really good people. I'm really
I
proud of
believe
them.
that. And they've got an extraordinary mother.
Oh, sure.
And before we close, and for this season, I did this with a purpose, because I know holidays can be hard as we started. You mentioned your family coming back for the holidays, and it brought tears to my eyes because it's just, yeah, that is so precious. Would you have any advice for either side, the family members who are struggling with an alcoholic or an addict that's a part of the family and they're going to be a part of the holidays, or they're not going to be part of the holidays, but they're still a part of the holidays because of what we go through?
Right.
Or perhaps the addict themselves, who right now, maybe they're battling day 5, maybe they're battling week 5, but the holidays are tough. Would you have any advice for any of those?
Sure. If you're going to visit family and you're not in your own town, find the meetings. Whether it's AA, NA, whatever, Overcomers Celebrate Recovery, find several meetings going on. If a conversation with a family member gets a little too heated and you feel like you're going to blow, call that meeting house. Even like I could ask Lindsay, drive me to a meeting. I need a meeting now. No questions. We get in the car. I go for an hour, do my meeting, come back. And so you always have an out. There's always a meeting. Always a meeting. Did I say there's always a meeting? The other thing is stay busy. Keep it to news, weather, and sports. Remember, you have an illness. It's a disease. You're not that disease. You have that disease. You have that affliction. Your family doesn't always understand that, or they're not ready to yet. That's okay. Eventually they will. If it's too much, remove yourself, take a step outside. I smoke cigarettes, so I got and smoked a cigarette and just calm myself back down. Just try to keep it lighthearted. Nothing's worth fighting over the holidays.
Is that what you meant by keep it to news, weather, and sports? Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, don't get into, well, you know what you did to me last year.
Well, keep it easy. News, weather, or sports.
Yeah.
And just go there.
Just keep it real simple. Keep it real simple. And it's not that hard. And stay busy.
Okay.
Stay busy.
Help while you're there. Help. Be a help.
Be of service. Exactly.
That's awesome. And for the families, I know from my standpoint, it's really hard because especially if the addict is being an addict around you, and you want to love them. I would just encourage you to try to allow yourself, again, forgiveness in the moment, and try to love the best that you can. And that doesn't mean coddle. That doesn't mean that that they're spoiled or they get whatever you might have to tough love too. Right. But be okay with yourself in that, because a lot of times there is no control.
Exactly.
There is no control. And you can't impart control when there's no control. And that's hard. That's hard for family members.
That's well put.
Well, joyous in the holidays. We wanted to tackle a tough subject before we came in to the holidays full blown. And I want to thank you, my friend, Valorie Martin, for sharing with us so candidly about a struggle and your overcoming of the struggle.
You can. And you get to eat all that food. You don't have to worry about your waistline.
Fantastic. Valorie, thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays. It'll be okay.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Talk to People podcast, in which we get to meet great people that live right here in our community, because the more that we get to talking to one another, the more we get to understand one another, and the more we come together. Amen. Happy holidays, Shawnee.
Thank you.